Hello, everybody, and welcome to a kind of really late movie review. I finally got around to watching Wonder Woman 1984, and I know it's months after the fact, and I feel like most people probably said their piece on it, but I feel compelled to talk about it because, typically talk about comic book movies and things like that on this channel, and I didn't watch many movies last year, so it was actually kind of refreshing to watch one, and I was a pretty big fan of still am a pretty big fan of the original Wonder Woman movie from 2017. So this one I know was kind of hyped up for a while, I think, and then I feel like because a lot of movies got pushed back in 2020, and the fact that this one got released at the end, there might have been more anticipation for it. So I got the feeling that expectations for it were very high overall, and reviews coming out, videos and various things like that online, it was very lukewarm, maybe even worse than lukewarm. I feel like there was a lot of negativity. I don't know if many people thought it was the worst thing ever, but I feel like a lot of people were certainly slamming it and were very disappointed by it. Now, I had the benefit of, a couple months after that, letting all that kind of die down and kind of going into it with, honestly, I don't know if I want to say very low expectations, because I did hear even people I asked mostly said that it was kind of mediocre, but I wanted to try to have like a clear head. I was kind of going into it not really expecting it to be the best thing ever, but I wanted to try and just kind of, go into it without any preconceived notions or anything. And long story short, if you don't want the details, I actually liked it quite a bit. I thought it was pretty good. And I was trying to figure out really what the problem is, and I know that from glossing over basic reviews, there is the idea, I guess, that it was cliche, and it definitely was, I guess, a pretty standard superhero movie in a lot of ways, which is funny because people do complain about that more now because I guess, especially after Marvel with the MCU, even though a lot of those are kind of formulaic in a way to their formula, there's this expectation that superhero movies can't just be basic superhero movies anymore. If they do what they basically are established as being expected to do now, that's just not enough. It has to break new ground. It has to try something new. It has to be dark and edgy like The Boys or something. And I just kind of was reminded of just the early days, like even maybe like 20 years ago, when superhero movies were still, they were becoming more popular, but they weren't seen as critical darlings as much as many of them are now. And they were fun, and they were fine. Some of them were problematic, but they just kind of basically did what they were supposed to do. You got your, sometimes an origin story, characters in the costume fights a colorful bad guy, and there's some plot in there, but that's essentially what you want to see. And this kind of reminded me of, honestly, some of the better films of that era, like, say, for instance, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a bit, but basically I liked it because I thought it was harkening back to the tone and goals of classic superhero stuff, which I don't really see as a bad thing. I'll admit it's not overly complicated, and it does have some minor issues, but for the most part, I think it met the goal that it was trying to meet. But that's essentially shortly what I think about it with the most brevity. As far as more details go, I've got more positives here, I think, than negatives, but basically, the thing that I want to highlight the most is, I'll start off with the negatives. I think the biggest problem with the movie is that it is a bit too long, because I will admit that I was a bit tired when I wanted to try and watch. It was a bit late, and I saw it was 2.5 hours. I'm like, it's already too late. I'm too tired. I'm not going to be able to watch it. So I watched the first half hour, and then I finished it the next night, and I'm thinking, okay, that didn't feel so bad, but I did kind of split it up. So I feel like you could easily have trimmed a half an hour with a lot of little scenes. It felt like there was some padding. So the pacing of the movie was a little bit of an issue. I think it was a bit long. Like, I think there's a pretty good story there, and they are juggling a lot, but it didn't feel like there was enough to justify that kind of runtime. I know a lot of movies, superhero movies, they want to try to make them epics. Heck, a lot of big franchises want to be that way. And to be fair, something like Wonder Woman could certainly be a 2.5 hour movie, but I feel like there had to be a little more going on, and even though it was a pretty big, epic stakes involved, I still don't think it was quite enough to really need that. And I think that the other thing that I know some people complained about, I remember Red Letter Media was kind of joking about it. I liked the thematic thing they were going for with the armor, which was, I kind of saw it as, okay, they're going to establish trying to meet this goal of, Diana being the great Amazonian hero in the armor, like this ancient warrior was, and almost like trying to kind of go retrieve this, mystical idea of this historical figure as like what we need this hero again. But of course, she'd get the armor thinking she needs it and then takes it off and it's like, I'm Wonder Woman. I am the hero we need now. I'm the new hero for the world. This is the true savior of the Amazons and just the world in general. Like, okay, she's Wonder Woman. She kind of has her moment where she's falling and then she bounces back and realizes who she is. I'm like, I get it. It was a cool moment. And it worked for me, but I will admit that the placement of it is a bit odd. Like, okay, you built up the armor, and there was a point that was made about how if she was losing her powers and then she got them back, it would have made sense for her to have to fight and lose with the armor and then have to make her difficult choice to get her powers back, and then she could take off the armor, be able to just defeat the bad guy, bad lady, with her Wonder Woman powers. So yeah, thematically I thought it was fine, but I admit the placement of it was a bit odd. So that wasn't as well handled as it could have been, but I still got it. And the thing I am sort of the most mixed issue with is actually Chris Pine, because going into more spoilers here, with this magical stone that they find, people can get a wish, and in return for the wish, they basically have to lose something important to them. It's kind of a Full Metal Alchemist thing going on here as I was watching it. So, of course, that was an interesting theme they're exploring as well. And Chris Pine, I will say I was kind of happy to see Chris Pine back because, other than him playing Kirk in the Abrams Star Trek movies, I feel like this is probably his best role. I really like him as Steve Trevor. He made Steve Trevor very charismatic, and he was actually one of my favorite aspects of the first movie. But the strength of it is still he's got great chemistry with Gal Gadot, and you really believe that. They have a lot of fun with that, and there is some real emotion there and some heartbreak there. Later on, you can really feel that, and that's one of the great strengths. However, there is this one part that's a little problematic, and is that to bring him back, I don't understand why he couldn't have. I really don't get it. I guess it's not perfect, of course, but he could have just come back to life and popped out of nowhere. Instead, he kind of inhabits the body of this guy, and she sees him as Trevor. I guess everybody else sees him as this other guy. So basically, he just hijacks another guy's life, and they didn't seem to have a problem with that. I guess she's just so mystified by it. But I'm like, this is another person we're talking about. So that was a little weird. It's possible I may have missed a line or two about why it wasn't a big deal. But I'm like, that seems a little odd. So that's kind of one thing I was a bit mixed about. But everything else about the movie I actually pretty much liked. Like I said, the chemistry was good. One thing I was really surprised about was just that I liked the villains quite a bit. I was wondering because Maxwell Lord, I actually thought I wasn't sure how to feel about him at first. Like he was kind of goofy, but I realized he's juggling a very complicated character with that whole used car salesman sort of persona, where he's really kind of really hamming it up, and you just clearly don't trust him. But he's actually very insecure, and he is trying to kind of achieve this greatness for his business because of this oversight. He doesn't understand. He's doing it for his son, basically to impress him and build a future for him. But he's willing to go to any lengths to do that, and it's very interesting. With the really just kind of like there's the evil twisted genie idea of wishing for more wishes. He just kind of becomes the stone and inherits its power. So it's really interesting. He grants other people's wishes and power to just get what he wants and take something from them to kind of grow more powerful and richer and just more invincible, basically. But of course, this causes this great calamity, and you can't mess with nature. You can't have shortcuts, which ties into the theme at the beginning of the movie with Diana going through her training, where she wants to win with a big relay thing, the race, but the Olympian sort of thing. But then she cheats, and you can't win if you cheat, and it's not really the truth, and kind of speaking to your own truth, and even if it's difficult, it's, I guess, better than a lie. And it's an interesting idea. And I think that that kind of really leads into some of the other strengths of the honestly just the main idea of the story, the theme about the sacrifice and selflessness of a hero, and just really trying to, even though it's difficult, kind of try to do something the right way, and realizing that the shortcuts can really disturb things, and that no matter how much you want something, it's not really worth hurting somebody else. And I thought that was a powerful idea, and it kind of fit with the mystical quality of the gem. And it's just such it's a simple idea, but you don't see something that straightforward, but also explored so well, and in such detail in many movies now. Like, I'm thinking of a lot of the Marvel films, for instance. They admittedly they try to flesh their characters out, and they do bounce around with interesting ideas, but very rarely is there like a big focused moral or uplifting theme like that, dealing with something very simple but very difficult that everybody can relate to, that I thought just was indicative of inspirational superhero stuff, which kind of goes into one of my other strengths. I thought just basically the themes of this movie were surprisingly well handled and really touched me. I actually got quite emotional, like when the father, Master Lord, kind of meets his son, and the son's like, oh, you don't have to do anything to get me to love you, like I always did. You're my dad. Like that, I thought that was a beautiful moment, and it's like you can kind of see it coming, but the acting from everybody too, the performances in general was just so good. In addition with the sweeping music, it's like, yeah, I could see how some people could perceive it as a little corny, but everybody was going there all in those scenes, really putting a lot of energy into it. So I felt it. So that's one reason we're like, no, I think this movie's working for me. But I thought he was pretty good. Actually, I thought he was. I was wondering I wasn't going to like him, but they made him a little more dynamic than I remember him being in the comics, so that was kind of refreshing. Also, Kirsten Wiig. I know that there was. I think that there was some questions about whether or not she would make a decent villain for Cheetah. And I know maybe because of her comedic background with SNL, but I remember I've seen her in some dramatic movies, and she did a pretty good job. I thought she was actually really good as this, of course, a person who, I guess once again we've seen it before, this person who's sort of admires the hero and is jealous of them and wants what they want, but realizes there's a cost to it, and kind of sort of seeing that she maybe should have appreciated herself, and not wanting to be like somebody else. So it's kind of in line with the themes of the movie, and it's just kind of a different perspective. But I thought her performance was very good, and I was also quite surprised by. I like the fact that her decline into being a villain was not automatic. Like they made her dynamic as well, where it's a very gradual fall. She's actually helping Wonder Woman throughout much of the movie, and what actually really surprised me is I thought, because I know that people didn't like cats very much, I was thinking, is the cheetah gonna look like cats with that really bad, ugly CGI? But of course they did it in darkness. It was at night, and I liked the fact that it wasn't too cat-like. There are some versions of Cheetah where her face is kind of more human, and that's what they went for, which I think was a smarter move. And she's not completely formed. She's got the spots and some of the fur, but she's very sleek. It's almost like it's a black and white kind of design. It didn't look like it was the standard yellow cheetah. So I thought that they actually made her look pretty cool, and some of the CGI fights, it wasn't too bad. It's not like the best I've ever seen, but it was much better than I thought it was going to be. And I liked the fact that she was in makeup, and there was some practical stuff close up, and that was also her gradual turning evil. Of course, she's got more dark eyeliner on and stuff. But I thought that was handled pretty well, and it's sort of ambiguous as to whether or not there's going to be some issues with her later on. So they left that kind of open, which I thought was interesting. And really, beyond that, like I said, in addition to handling some pretty good themes and having an uplifting message that I think really was sort of universal, but also harkening back to really the ideas of old school comic book movies and just comic books in the early days. And specifically, I mean, this might be the most obvious thing, but Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman was just really, really good, and I actually think that in the first movie, she was certainly growing in her origin story and kind of becoming Wonder Woman, but I feel like here she fully is Wonder Woman, and I know we've seen her a bit in other movies, but this is the first time that I felt like, wow, this is classic Wonder Woman here, fully. And once again, it's this interesting balance where I could see some people thinking it's cheesy, but when she's doing her Wonder Woman stuff, as I was thinking, I was like, oh, she's doing her Wonder Woman thing where she's twirling the lasso around and she's throwing her tiara and she's jumping around, she's rescuing kids and she's flipping over cars and she's also very polite to the robbers and stuff. Like she's like, oh, no, none of that now. She's like kind of slightly scolding, but it's like a little cheeky. I love that. I absolutely loved that. I just thought that was really refreshing, and it just made me feel good to watch that. It was very fun and wholesome, and it felt very genuine to the character, and it also looked good. Just the love, like I say, with all the dreary superhero movies these days, like with Wonder, even more than the first Wonder Woman movie, it was so colorful with those effects, the glow around the lasso of truth and everything, and with her costume when she's flying around floating. Like, yeah, okay, it's a little cheesy, but even the way she moves, she almost floats, and it feels like kind of a more old school approach where it's a little bit goofy, but it's just right. It feels right. It actually reminded me a bit of classic Wonder Woman, and specifically, I guess, Linda Carter from the '70s show, which you kind of tell later on that's clearly what they were trying to focus on, and that made me feel good. And I feel like any fans of certainly classic Wonder Woman, or really just the character in general, I felt like that was a really good representation of that, which it felt very true. And I actually felt like, in comparison to the first movie, which I do think is overall certainly better, I think the structure of this movie feels a little better, with the exception of the length, where I know a lot of people didn't like the ending of the first one, which I was okay with. The villain and that dark CGI fight was kind of overblown, and how they handled Ares. But I felt like, in comparison, this one just was a more solid structure. I felt like the ending was a bit more satisfying, I would think, for more people, because it felt more in line with the rest of the movie, and it was more colorful, and it felt more like Wonder Woman in some ways than the first movie. At least the character did. Really, just in terms of when she was doing her superhero thing and when she was investigating stuff, she still was very much the same person. I liked that. And there were some interesting balances too, where kind of showing that she had her own problems, like she, was still not really able to get into a relationship with somebody because she was still hung up on Steve Trevor, or just Chris Pine, as I keep wanting to call him. And all these guys are just hitting on her all the time, and she's like not interested. Like, she's just constantly being hit on. It's almost like bordering on harassment, which is one reason why Cheetah character, when she takes that wish to try to be more like Diana, she gets a lot of unwanted attention, which actually leads her to kind of really hate that and want to, be able to bounce back and take on the villainous persona. So it's like kind of a dark side of that sort of thing. So it's very interesting, and I just thought it was pretty well structured overall. Though I do wonder if everyone felt that way, because I remember I felt like she was certainly a strong character too. But I will admit, it was. I guess some people might not necessarily like the fact that she was with. She was still pining for Chris Pine, pun totally intended, after all those years, and she never wanted to move on. But so I get some people might not like that, like really she can't get over some guy. But I mean, I get it. It's classic, her first real love, so it's more mystical and simplistic, I guess, because she was more innocent in the beginning. So it still kind of is. So that's why I bought that. I think that's fine for the movie, and she can move on, and she has some growth, and that powerful moment of having to let go of something she really loves in order to just be who she's supposed to be because the world needs her, and make that sacrifice. Like, great moment, really. And she sold it well when she's walking away and she's like, I renounced my wish. Like, I was there. I felt it. Like, the performances were good. The music was used effectively. Oh, and there were also cute little things where, they do the invisible plane thing, which is classic. I thought that's fun. They did that, and they got Wonder Woman to fly. I'm like, yeah, she flies, actually, which is kind of silly, but yeah, she does fly, and they managed to actually handle that pretty well, and how they integrated that into the story, where she has to learn that kind of through Steve being a pilot, and that's something she's unsure of, and then learns to kind of become more empowered to that and use one of her Wonder Woman powers. It's great to kind of just glide through the air. So that was really cool. Once again, that balancing between cheesy but just kind of awesome. Really, I thought it was quite powerful. Actually, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it as far as Wonder Woman 1984 goes. I I thought there also were some. It did feel kind of like the '80s, but they definitely could have done more with the '80s theme. But I thought there was enough. But honestly, I feel like it could have taken place anytime, really, with the exception of a couple things. But yeah, this is my very late thoughts on Wonder Woman 1984. I actually wanted it to be shorter than this because I figured, I'd just get my thoughts out quick. But I really just felt compelled to make a little video just giving my thoughts about it because I just felt like from what I heard, there was just so much negativity about this, and I want to offer a different perspective because I really feel like this is just a kind of a classic feel-good superhero movie that isn't really breaking the mold particularly, but it actually is kind of going back to classic stuff and really fleshing it out in ways we haven't seen in a long time. And I feel like it was emulating the style of classic Wonder Woman, but as I was saying in the beginning, more wholesome, sweeping, epic stories like with the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, or honestly kind of reminded me a bit of the original Superman, Christopher Reeve. It feels a lot like that, and it's the same sort of tone. It's feel good, it's uplifting, it's colorful, it's fun, and that's what I just think the pure idea of the comic book movie is, and a comic book superhero movie can do that well. That's fine. That's still a win for sure. They're allowed to still do that. And I think for the most part, WW84 did do it, though it did have some problems, like I said, with the length, how they handled the armor, and the Chris Pine and the guy's body thing was a little odd. I don't know why they didn't stick with that more. He could have just appeared. I don't really know why they did it that way. I mean, I guess they had some of the comedic bits where he's dressing up in different '80s clothes, which was funny, but I was just like, I don't know quite how well that one was handled. But like I said, there are some issues with it, but for me, they were mostly minor. I would actually recommend it, and I'd still say, hey, give this one another try sometime down the line. It's not bad, and I still recommend it if you haven't seen it. Like, if you liked the first movie, I think there's definitely still something here worth seeing. But that's my thoughts on Wonder Woman 1984. Let me know what you all thought about it, if you liked it, disliked it. Maybe I missed something. Maybe you could explain something. But please let me know if anybody saw it. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching / listening, whatever. Stay magical.